Hello, everyone. Now, what I'm about to talk about, I say with the utmost sincerity, and any editing that I may do, um, pertaining to it, is for the sake of expediency, as I know the attention span of many is hardly the best anymore. I would argue that even my own has its faults, regardless of growing up. Currently 38 and growing up a kind of more pre-internet time, partially pre-internet time. I would consider it as such, as it was very, very slow. When I was a kid and a teenager, it was still slow. It wasn't until my 20s and now my 30s that it became of any kind of quick, you know, uh, entertainment dispensing fashion that it is today. But that's neither here nor there. What I want to talk about today is advocacy, the idea of advocacy, my relationship with it in the past as well as the present, my thoughts on it, my concerns, and the path that kind of led up to me even participating in such a thing, which I would have never contemplated in youth. So, alright, here we go. Now, growing up, I was always looking for something. I was always looking for a sense of understanding about my environment, about my world. Growing up a neurodivergent kid, whether that's the ADHD I was diagnosed with as a child, or if that's the schizo-spectrum I identify with now as a schizoid. Um, it's always been a tough sort of psychologically hard knock life, let's say. Around me, I constantly viewed what I perceived to be very confusing, very contradictory, very alarming behaviors and the people, not just in my local environment, but in extended ones as well, such as school, then later larger swaths of society. As I got older, the more I got involved with other people, the more I got to know humanity, on a more local, anecdotal level, which isn't worth much in many ways. Subjectively, worth a lot. Objectively, not worth much as far as, data goes or whatever. But nonetheless, the more I discovered, the more discouraged I got. The more downtrodden I got. The more my dysthymia grew and my general demeanor became more pessimistic. And oddly, not more cynical, though I often tried to lean into it to cope with the amount of pessimism that just kept brewing inside of me. And regardless of how much my pessimism grew about my fellow man, I still wanted to learn. I still wanted to know, what is this? What's causing this? Is it me? Is there something wrong with me? Am I not seeing the picture that everyone else is? Is my picture, though, through my own perception, to be a one more concentrated on, well, the reduction of certain types of suffering? Is that picture the incorrect picture? Or am I actually causing more suffering and having such an image in my head and then trying to live by it? Something I struggled with for a very long time. So, as a child, I was always frustrated with family members. I was always frustrated with what little I did understand or kept learning about the world. As I got older, I became more frustrated, more discouraged. So I kept trying. I kept trying to learn more. I thought, well, there must be a solution to all this. There must be something that could be done or changed, right? And so I looked into what other people were doing. And I thought, I became idealistic at times, thinking, oh, well, maybe this person discovered something of value that can actually change things for the better. Interesting. Oh, look, they're trying. Oh, look, they're failing. Oh, look, they're still trying. Oh, look, the world has crushed them. They are dead. Or metaphorically dead. And perhaps their idea has been killed. And so, in these kind of meanderings of my mind, I decided history was where I could find some answers. The occult was where I could find some answers. So I started reading history. I started reading books on all sorts of kind of esoteric ideas and philosophies, and everything from Crowley to LaVey to more conventional philosophy from Socrates to Nietzsche, and so on and so forth. I dabbled in all sorts of things, seeking some kind of answer that could solve this human conundrum, at least for me, right? I had no grandiose notions of being able to, maybe in my youth, I would say probably my 20s, early 20s, I had no grandiose notions of being able to make any fundamental change, any even significant change. But with the more I learned about human history, the more I went to school and eventually got my master's in studying history and historical theory. More specifically, the more discouraged I still continued to become. So then I sort of started giving up. Stopped caring even more, since I already felt generally pretty disconnected from society and from people. In most cases, felt completely alienated, confused as to why those connections even occur, considering the horrors that humanity partakes in and unleashes on a daily basis. How can those things be just ignored? How can they just be not calculated into your daily existence? Your daily thoughts about your own efforts and the futility of said efforts at times. And so then you have people saying things like, well, focus on your life, focus on what you can do to improve your life. And for some of us, that's enough. I'll tell you right now, for a lot of the schizo-spectrum people, many other types of neurodivergence, that's definitely not enough. It's hardly enough. You can have many good things going for you in your life, and all you have to do is look out the window, and all of a sudden, all that sort of melts away in your hands. It's a sickening sight. It's a sight that others that are satisfied by such things don't want to behold, because it'll encumber their own ability to merely keep moving on. So something in me had to make a decision. Over the years, stop moving. And that could take many variations of what that looks like. Or keep moving anyway. So I kept moving. Kept trying. And all these efforts, only more recently have I realized that all these efforts, be it an interest in philosophy, occult, and history, went to school, everything else, practicing various forms of ethics and moral perception, blah, 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 all that fun stuff, was both an attempt at me trying to create a sort of sense of identity against this backdrop that I found so both invalidating and utterly despair-filled. I still kept going. I still kept trying. But I didn't know that I was trying to advocate for anything. I didn't consider myself to be an advocate for anything. I was merely trying to find some kind of answer that made sense. So then, I decided to, over time, step out into a different kind of advocacy and be more open about it, which is one pertaining to mental health, and more specifically, schizoids, and a little less specifically, but still just as importantly, schizo-spectrum people. And part of that was because I've discovered in myself that though I don't suffer with positive symptoms, as it's generally described with other people like schizophrenics or schizoaffectives and even schizotypals, their personalities, their thoughts, their feelings, the manner in which they interpret so much of their world is relatable. The difficulties, the depression, the anhedonia, and the avolition that comes with gazing upon a world that is seemingly bent on its own destruction. A species that is craving and guided by behaviors and instincts that will ultimately lead to its extinction, perhaps, though unsurprisingly. And that's hard for me to swallow, right? And it's funny, too, because that brings me to another point, which is a lot of the assumptions regarding schizoids is that we are indifferent people. We just have we're misanthropic and just have a disdain for the social, and are just so detached from ourselves emotionally or regarding a sense of identity that we merely just float in the ether and wish to float in that ether alone, in the void and of space where no sound can be heard, no breath can be taken. And that's not the case at all. I used to believe that about myself. I used to believe that's what I wanted, that's what I was. I used to believe that the only way to overcome this inevitable slide into madness and despair was to become a person, was to think like my neighbors, feel like my fellow man, be motivated by this cacophony of seemingly hedonistic motivations to me. But my definition of something being hedonistic would obviously be entirely different than I think most would point toward. But again, I'm just losing myself. As I speak, it happens. But I started delving more into psychology, research pertaining to schizoid, other sorts of things associated, neurodivergence as a whole, the manner in which even the most modern societies, nations, states handle mental health, handle more specifically neurodivergent people, including autistic ones. And the more I learned, the more discouraged I became. Oftentimes, what's the trope? Knowledge is power. At times it feels like knowledge is merely pain. And the power comes from learning how to navigate said pain, I guess. The more knowledge one attains, the more pain it often feels like one is gaining in the process. That seems to be my own experience much of the time. But still, I wish to persevere. Because there's one discovery I've made inside myself, is that part of the reason nothing really gets done Or it takes this long for anything to get done, and then, it's the whole 3 steps forward, 4 steps back, or 2 steps forward, 1 step back. No, sorry, 1 step forward, 2 steps back type situation. Is because those that do advocacy, those that do decide to push forward in some way, are both limited in their own capacity to think outside of the very ideas they're trying to espouse. Okay? They believe themselves self-righteous. They believe themselves correct. So much so that it ends up in a situation in which they end up doing incorrect things, destructive things even, in the process of attempting to advocate and help. So I take that, or those sort of thoughts, into consideration in my own efforts. I figure, you need as many fail-safes as possible. You can make this as idiot-proof as possible because I'm an idiot. So the nuance, the context, always take into consideration many variables, as many as your small brain can handle. And then the other part that makes it difficult is that even if you overcome your own limitations to whatever degree, many of your own biases, you attempt to metacognate to a variety of factors so that when you advocate and when you try to push forward, you are as transparent, sincere, and motivated as possible. But even then, discouragement, despair, and the pain of knowing, pain of outer discovery as well as self, eventually leads to a path of resignation and a path of despondence and apathy. And I think that's what happens to a lot of schizoids, right? I think because of how abstract their concerns tend to be, how conceptual their preoccupations often are, as they usually are for a lot of schizo-spectrum people, all they see in the meta landscape of their world is contradiction, hypocrisy, suffering, and perpetuation of those very things. The narrowing nature of what motivates the average person. Narrowed down to the moral or ethical equivalent of a single-celled organism. Caught between the destruction of utilitarianism and the destruction of naivete and completely idealistic thinking. Constant sway, a chain sling, moving like a pendulum toward more death and destruction. Every time it leans to one side or another, every time it needs to be pushed back into a centered adjustment, more, again, and again. Such things are too much to bear. And so, those that advocate for any major change generally give up. And those that can perceive it, in general, even before attempting to advocate for change anything, discover, at least within themselves, that there's no point. They won't accomplish anything. And so they make zero attempt. And I cannot blame them. I cannot judge them for it. I cannot say, oh, well, if only you worked harder, if only you saw past your own despair, the world could change. The world would be a better place. Because then that's putting the onus on the very few that could even see it. And that's unfair as well. Now, in my own efforts, right, pertaining to advocacy, I attempt to network, I attempt to talk to all kinds of people outside of my wheelhouse. I attempt to contact doctors that wrote papers that I agree or disagree with, or I agree with parts of. I attempt to contact psychs. I attempt to contact everything from neuroscientists to other types of advocates, to people with larger platforms that might be interested in giving me a small chance to talk about the things that I think are of great value. And the more I do this, the more discouraged I become as well. It's not like I'm impatient. It's not like I demand anything of them. Some of the responses I get are just so... It's not that they're negative or hateful or crass, disrespectful, none of that. No. It's just like same sort of lack of metacognition that doesn't even allow them to see the value in which an effort such as this, with the help of so many others, could overlap with their own efforts. And as those things overlap, you end up in a situation where all, over time, seem to benefit. And it depends on your definition of benefit, right? My definition of benefit is growing the channel, growing the streams I do on Twitch, and everything else to a degree, to where I can fund the nonprofit I want to create, which can then grow even further, which can then put other people on platforms that don't have them, that want to talk about these subjects or share their experiences, and then keep going from there, and then eventually inspire perhaps other people to do a far better job than I ever could. Ultimately, that's like one of my greatest goals, is to inspire other schizoids, schizo-spectrum people to shed the utter despair, discouragement, and indifference that they may feel on a consistent basis when they look out the window and into the world, and to do something regardless of those things, without invalidating the very idea of why it is justifiable to be as apathetic and discouraged as they have needed to be in order to survive this world. Which again brings me to the point: the more schizoids I meet, the more I discover that there is a significant amount of empathy, a significant amount of care, so much empathy that their own minds, at some eventual point, has caused them to disassociate from their feelings and a need to just keep one's sanity intact. A lot of schizoids I talk about moments in which that disassociation fails them, and for a temporary period they feel the full brunt of that empathy, and it kills them, shatters them, and only until they can disassociate once again from it, and they pick up those pieces and continue moving on. But facing, combating the things that kill them inside in any kind of hopeful way in their own lives as well as the lives of others is so much pain to bear that they choose to do nothing in the face of it. Then I can't blame them. Some of that discouragement for me comes from seeing this world lacking in a plethora of metacognitive skills. Even the institutions themselves that discuss mental health, papers, researchers, those who present themselves as being scientifically minded, unbiased, and focused entirely on a description of the nature of certain things regarding mental health and neurodivergency, are constantly lacking in so much metacognition that the very papers, the very pieces of research I read makes that very apparent. And the people doing such work in the therapeutic world and otherwise don't have any idea it's happening. They don't even know. So much so that I've seen forms of therapy that are attempting to instill metacognition in many of those that suffer with psychosis and many of those that are considered schizo-spectrum. When metacognition is the reason those people are sometimes crippled, mentally crippled by the world that they inhabit. But still, they're trying to produce more of it. Only in a direction that will make them more functional, more available, more compliant to a society that they already oftentimes perceive as being run by madmen and supported by cowardice, fear of death. Fear of worthlessness. Fear of invalidation. And the name of those things, the banality of evil, grows and grows and grows. So I know to some of you out there that are listening, I sound insane. I may not make any sense. In fact, I may sound like an idiot. That's fine. I'm okay with that. I don't do this to sound smart or like some philosopher king or some bullshit like that. I do this because I think other people feel similar and they struggle with the same things. But to them, I say, advocate anyway. Try anyway. Discuss it anyway. Take those risks. Because if you're just going to be feeling like shit regardless, like I often do, you might as well. Sometimes you feel like you have nothing to lose. Well, that might be the case some days. But other days, there's plenty to gain. And how you define that gain is up to you. Not up to society, not up to your parents, your neighbors, or any of those people, not up to the state. It's up to you. So keep at it. Stay self-aware. Keep talking. Mitigate suffering. Unproductive suffering, more specifically, because all suffering cannot be mitigated. Some suffering is required. Some suffering is merely part of the process of being human, and to deny it is madness. Some suffering is so utterly unproductive and so avoidable that to keep perpetuating it is madness. And that is why I feel like I live in an already very much insane world. Insane by my definition. Not the definitions of the neurotypical framework we often inhabit. Okay. I think that's it for now. I haven't done a ramble like this in a little while. Kind of an off-the-cuff sort of ramble on something. I'm not even sure if I talked about the right things. But it is what it is. If you like these sort of rambles, please tell me in the comments. If you disagree, please tell me in the comments. If you think I'm a fucking idiot, please tell me in the comments. If you think what I'm doing is wrong or dangerous, please tell me in the comments. If you think what I'm doing is right and courageous, don't tell me that. don't tell me that. Okay, if you agree with what I'm saying, tell me in the comments. Don't write words like courageous. Yeah, don't compliment me. If you want to compliment what you think is worthwhile in some of the stuff I say, cool, do that. I don't like getting compliments about myself. That might just be my own pathology or whatever. In any case, if you support all this, subscribe, like the video, spread it on whatever Reddits you think are applicable, or whatever places you think are applicable, the links to the video. Please subscribe on Patreon. Please subscribe to my Twitch. Follow me there. I will be talking tonight, 7 p.m. PST. I'm not sure what the subject will be, but I'm experimenting more recently with trending topics, even though I haven't uttered disdain for most of them. They seem to be more algorithm friendly, so I am experimenting with it. It's a more utilitarian sort of manner of which to try to spread whatever crazed ramblings this schizoid can provide the world that some might find useful. And if you don't like any of that stuff, like Patreon or subscriptions or whatever on Twitch, or bits or whatever while I'm doing live streams, you can always just PayPal too. PayPal gifts are appreciated. Okay. I think that's it. I feel like I'm missing something. I'm always missing something. I always feel like I'm missing something. There's always something to be missed. Thanks a lot, guys. And like I said, please leave a comment. I learn a lot from what others try to convey to me, criticize or whatever. Goodbye.